The moment Ophelia Fletcher stumbled into Pioche, Nevada in the bitter winter of 1881. She knew she had made a terrible mistake leaving her aunt's farm in Missouri. But staying there after her aunt's death would have meant becoming the unpaid servant to distant cousins who looked at her body with disgust and her inheritance with greed. Snow fell in thick curtains across the mining town, unusual for Nevada, but not impossible in these high elevations during January's cruel grip, and Ophelia pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her large frame as she trudged down the muddy Main Street. Her boots, worn thin at the soles, offered little protection against the freezing slush that seeped through with each step. She had 23 cents in her pocket, a carpet bag containing 2 dresses and her mother's Bible, and absolutely no prospects in a town full of miners who barely looked at her except to sneer. Ophelia was 20 years old and had been heavy all her life, her body round and soft in a world that valued slender waists and delicate frames. Back in Missouri, the church ladies had whispered behind their hands about her size, wondering aloud how any man would ever want her, conveniently forgetting that Ophelia had a quick mind for figures and could read Latin as well as any schoolteacher. Her aunt had been kind, at least, never commenting on the way Ophelia's dresses strained at the seams or how she needed the chair with arms at the dinner table. But her aunt was gone now, buried 3 months past, and the relatives who descended on the farm like vultures had made it clear that Ophelia's only value was in the labor she could provide. So she had taken what little money her aunt had hidden away for her, sewn into the lining of an old quilt, and bought a train ticket west. Pioche had been a random choice, a name on a map that sounded like possibility. The reality was harsh wooden buildings, muddy streets, and suspicious eyes that followed her as she searched for somewhere, anywhere, that might offer work or shelter. The first place she tried was a boarding house run by a thin-lipped woman named Mrs. Cartwright, who looked Ophelia up and down with barely concealed contempt. "We have no rooms available," she said, though Ophelia could see through the window that at least 3 rooms stood empty. "And even if we did, I run a respectable establishment. I cannot have someone of your appearance disturbing my other guests." Ophelia felt the familiar burning in her cheeks, the shame that came with being judged before she could even speak. "I can pay," she said quietly, though the words felt hollow. Her money would not last long, certainly not at boarding house rates. I said no. Mrs. Cartwright closed the door firmly, and Ophelia stood on the porch for a long moment before turning away. The next several establishments proved equally unwelcoming. The hotel manager barely let her finish asking about work before shaking his head. The general store owner said he had no positions available. The restaurant owner took one look at her and said, "I cannot have someone like you serving food. People would think we let our help eat all the profits." By the time the winter sun began its early descent behind the mountains, Ophelia was desperate, cold, and hungrier than she had been in days. She had eaten the last of the bread and cheese she had brought from Missouri that morning, thinking she would find work and a meal by evening. Now her stomach cramped with emptiness, and the cold seemed to seep deeper into her bones with each passing minute. She found herself near the edge of town, where a small church stood with its doors open. A line of people, mostly men in rough mining clothes, shuffled inside slowly. Ophelia joined the line, hope flickering weakly in her chest. Perhaps this was a soup kitchen, a place where Christian charity still meant something. The man at the door was young, perhaps 25, with a clean collar that marked him as the pastor despite his youth. He smiled at each person who entered, handing them something wrapped in cloth. When Ophelia reached the door, his smile faltered slightly, his eyes moving over her frame with a flicker of something she had learned to recognize. Not quite disgust, but close. Pity mixed with judgment. "Here you are, sister," he said, his voice carefully neutral as he pressed a bundle into her hands. "May the Lord bless and keep you." Ophelia stepped aside, out of the wind but still outside the church proper, and unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a piece of bread frozen solid, hard as a rock. She stared at it in disbelief, then looked at the man ahead of her in line. He had received the same thing and was trying to bite into it, his teeth unable to make a dent in the frozen surface. Others were tucking the bread away, presumably to thaw it later near a fire. But Ophelia had no fire to go to. No room, no stove, no place to wait while bread thawed. She tried to bite it anyway, desperate enough to risk her teeth, but it was impossible. The bread might as well have been a stone. She felt tears pricking at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. She had not cried when her aunt died, not when her cousins told her to leave, not when she spent 2 days on trains with nothing but hard seats and hostile stares. She would not cry over frozen bread. "Miss," a voice spoke behind her, low and rough with a western drawl. "That bread is not fit for eating, not in that state." Ophelia turned to find a man standing a few feet away, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders under a heavy sheepskin coat. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark hair and a face that was handsome in a weathered, lived-in way. He looked to be in his late 20s, with gray eyes that studied her not with disgust or pity, but with something else. Concern, perhaps. "It is what was offered," Ophelia said quietly, wrapping the bread back up. "I am grateful for charity." "Charity should not come in a form that cannot be used," the man said. His voice carried an edge of frustration, though not directed at her. "You are new to Pioche." It was not a question, but Ophelia nodded anyway. "I arrived today. And have you found lodging? Work?" "Not yet." The words came out more bitter than she intended, "but I am sure something will turn up." The man's eyes moved over her face, then down to the carpetbag at her feet, taking in her worn coat and thin boots. When his gaze returned to her face, she braced herself for the usual judgment, the inevitable commentary on her size and unmarriageability. Instead, he said, "My name is Atticus Vance. I run a ranch about 3 miles out of town. I also own the bakery on the next street over. I was in town picking up supplies when I heard the church was handing out frozen bread again." His jaw tightened. It is a cruel thing to give people food they cannot eat and call it kindness. "I am Ophelia Fletcher," she said, unsure where this conversation was leading. "Miss Fletcher, would you come with me to my bakery? I have fresh bread there, still warm from this afternoon's baking. You should eat with dignity, not gnaw on frozen charity like a dog with a bone." The words were so unexpected, so completely different from anything anyone had said to her in months, that Ophelia could only stare at him. Atticus Vance waited patiently, his gray eyes steady on her face. "I cannot pay you," she finally said. "I have almost nothing. I am not asking for payment. I am offering you a meal." He paused, then added, "If you are looking for work, my housekeeper recently left to care for her ailing mother in California. The ranch house needs someone to manage it, and I am a poor hand at domestic matters. The position would include room and board, plus wages." Ophelia's heart began to beat faster. This had to be some kind of trick, some cruel joke. Men like Atticus Vance, tall and strong and capable, did not offer work to women like her without ulterior motives. "What would you expect in return?" she asked bluntly. His eyebrows rose. "Housekeeping. Cooking, laundry. Managing the household accounts if you are capable with figures, nothing more. I am not that kind of man, Miss Fletcher, though I understand your caution in asking." Why? The question burst out of her. Why would you offer this to me? You do not know me. You do not know if I can cook or keep house. And I am. She gestured at herself, at her large body, unable to finish the sentence. Atticus's expression softened. What you are is cold, hungry, and in need of help. As for your capabilities, we can determine that together. If you cannot cook, you can learn. If you do not suit the position, we will discover that quickly enough. But right now, you need food and warmth, and I can provide both. Everything else we can figure out after you have eaten. Ophelia studied him for a long moment, trying to see past his words to any hidden malice or mockery. She had become good at reading people's faces, at seeing the disgust they tried to hide behind polite smiles. But Atticus Vance's face showed only patience and sincerity, with perhaps a hint of anger still lingering from seeing the frozen bread. "All right," she said finally, because what choice did she have? If this was a trick, at least she might get a meal out of it first. And if it was not, if he was truly offering her work and shelter, then refusing would be the height of foolishness. "I will come to your bakery." "Good." Atticus picked up her carpet bag before she could protest. "It is just around the corner. The walk will warm you up a bit." They walked in silence through the darkening streets, Ophelia acutely aware of the curious glances from the few people still out in the cold. She was used to being stared at, but walking beside Atticus, Vance felt different somehow. He did not hurry ahead of her or walk apart as if ashamed to be seen in her company. Instead, he matched his pace to hers, his long stride shortened to accommodate her slower steps. The bakery was a neat wooden building with large windows that glowed with warm lamplight. A sign above the door read, "Vance Bakery," in simple lettering. Atticus unlocked the door and ushered Ophelia inside, and the warmth hit her like a physical embrace. The scent of bread and cinnamon and sugar filled the air, so rich and wonderful that Ophelia's empty stomach clenched painfully. The front room held a counter and shelves that were mostly empty now, the day's baking sold or distributed. Behind the counter was a doorway that led to the kitchen, where Ophelia could see a large brick oven, work tables, and shelves stocked with supplies. Atticus led her through to the kitchen and pulled out a chair at a small table near the oven. "Sit," he said, not unkindly. "Warm yourself while I get you something to eat." Ophelia sat, her legs trembling with exhaustion and relief. She watched as Atticus moved around the kitchen with surprising grace for such a large man. He pulled a loaf of bread from a covered basket, sliced it thick, and set several pieces in a pan to warm near the oven. Then he ladled soup from a pot on the stove, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef. Within minutes, he set a bowl of steaming soup and a plate of warm buttered bread in front of her, along with a cup of hot coffee. "Eat slowly," he advised. "If you have not eaten much today, your stomach will rebel if you rush." Ophelia wanted to devour everything in front of her, to shovel the food into her mouth as fast as she could swallow. But she forced herself to take small bites, to chew thoroughly, to let the warmth and nourishment spread through her body gradually. The soup was the best thing she had ever tasted, rich and savory with a depth of flavor that spoke of hours of simmering. The bread was soft and warm, the butter melting into it perfectly. She had never been given food this good, served this kindly, with no strings attached and no judgment in the giver's eyes. Atticus poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her, not watching her eat but not ignoring her either. He seemed content to wait until she had finished, asking nothing of her. When the bowl and plate were empty, he refilled both without comment, and Ophelia ate a second helping more slowly, savoring each bite. Finally, when she truly could not eat another mouthful, she set down her spoon and looked at him. "Thank you," she said quietly. I have not been shown such kindness in a long time. Everyone deserves to eat with dignity, Atticus said. That frozen bread nonsense the church hands out has always bothered me. If you are going to give charity, give something useful. Give something that does not humiliate the person receiving it. You feel strongly about it, Ophelia observed. I do. Atticus's jaw tightened again. My mother and I were on the receiving end of charity after my father died when I was 12. Some of it was given with genuine kindness. Some of it was given in ways that made sure we knew we were being pitied, that we were less than those giving it. I swore then that if I ever had the means to help others, I would do it in a way that preserved their dignity. Ophelia felt something shift in her chest, a small crack in the walls she had built around herself. How did you end up with a ranch and a bakery? Long story. Atticus smiled slightly. The short version is that I worked as a ranch hand from the time I was 13, saved every penny and bought a small piece of land when I was 21. I built it up over the years. The bakery came later, about 3 years ago. My mother taught me to bake, and I found I had a talent for it. Pioche needed a good bakery, so I provided one. A man named Thomas Whitmore runs it during the week while I am at the ranch. I come in on Sundays to do the week's prep work. That is quite an achievement, Ophelia said, genuinely impressed, building all of that from nothing. Not nothing. I had help along the way. People who gave me chances, who taught me skills, who believed I could be more than a poor orphan boy. Atticus looked at her steadily. Which brings me back to my offer. I need a housekeeper, Miss Fletcher. The job is real, and so is the wage. $5 a week plus room and board. You would have your own room in the ranch house, privacy and respect. In return, I would expect the house kept clean, meals prepared, and basic household management. If you are good with figures, there are accounts to be managed as well. If you are willing, we can try it for a week and see if we suit each other. $5 a week. Room and board, privacy and respect. It sounded too good to be true, and yet Atticus spoke with such straightforward honesty that Ophelia found herself believing him. I can cook, she said slowly. My aunt taught me well. I can keep house, manage accounts, do laundry and mending. I am good with figures. I was educated through the 8th grade and read extensively. Then you are more than qualified. Atticus stood. It is late, and the ranch is 3 miles out. We will not make it tonight in the dark and cold. There is a room upstairs here above the bakery. It is simple but clean, with a good bed and a stove. You can stay there tonight, and we will head to the ranch in the morning. Does that suit you? Ophelia nodded, hardly daring to believe that this day, which had started so miserably, was ending with shelter, food, and the promise of work. Yes, thank you, Mr. Vance. Atticus, he said. If we are going to be working together, we might as well use our given names. Atticus, Ophelia repeated, tasting the name. Then you should call me Ophelia. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his serious face into something warm and approachable. Ophelia it is. Come on, I will show you to the room. The room above the bakery was indeed simple, but it was clean and warm, with a narrow bed covered in quilts, a small stove, a washstand, and a braided rug on the floor. To Ophelia, who had expected to spend the night shivering in some alley or begging for space in a church pew, it looked like paradise. There is water in the pitcher, and I will bring up some coal for the stove, Atticus said. If you need anything else, I will be downstairs for another hour or so, finishing some work. Just knock on the floor and I will hear you. After he left, Ophelia sat on the bed and let herself shake. Reaction was setting in, the terror of the day catching up with her now that she was safe. She had been so close to disaster, so close to sleeping in the cold or worse. And then Atticus Vance had appeared like something out of a story, offering help without mockery, food without humiliation, work without degradation. She did not quite trust it yet. Years of being judged, rejected, and dismissed had taught her to be suspicious of kindness. But Atticus had not looked at her the way most people did. He had not stared at her body with disgust or pity. He had looked at her face, listened to her words, and treated her like a person worthy of respect. That night, warm and fed for the first time in days, Ophelia slept deeply and did not dream. In the morning, Atticus knocked on her door just after dawn. "I have coffee and breakfast ready downstairs when you are ready," he called through the door. "No rush, but I would like to get to the ranch before noon." Ophelia washed quickly in the cold water from the pitcher, changed into her other dress, which was slightly less worn, and braided her dark hair neatly. When she came downstairs, she found Atticus in the kitchen with fresh coffee, fried eggs, bacon, and more of that wonderful bread toasted and buttered. They ate together in comfortable silence, and then Atticus closed up the bakery, loaded her carpetbag into a wagon waiting outside, and helped her up onto the seat. The ride out to the ranch took about 45 minutes through terrain that was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. The mountains rose around them, still dusted with snow from the recent storm. The air was cold and crisp, and their breath fogged in the morning light. Atticus drove the wagon with easy competence, pointing out landmarks along the way. "That is Miner's Peak," he said, indicating a mountain to the north. "Good hunting up there for deer and elk. The ranch is in a valley just beyond this ridge. It is good land with a creek that runs year-round and enough grass for cattle." They crested the ridge, and Ophelia saw the ranch spread out below them. It was more substantial than she had expected, with a large main house, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, dark shapes against the brown grass. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney, indicating that ranch hands were already up and working. "It is beautiful," Ophelia said honestly. "It is home," Atticus replied simply. He drove the wagon up to the main house and helped Ophelia down. "Come on, I will show you around." The house was solidly built of wood and stone, with a wide porch and good windows. Inside, it was clear that a woman's touch had been missing for some time. The rooms were clean enough, but there was a bachelor's randomness to the arrangement. Books were stacked on tables instead of shelved. Dishes were washed but not put away properly. Curtains hung crooked. Nothing was dirty, but nothing was quite right either. "I do my best," Atticus said, sounding almost apologetic. "But keeping house was never my strong suit. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, kept things running smoothly. Since she left 2 months ago, I have been managing, but not well." "I can see where help is needed," Ophelia said diplomatically. The house had good bones, good furniture, and clear potential. It just needed proper organization and care. Atticus showed her the kitchen, which was large and well equipped with a good stove, a pantry stocked with supplies, and a hand pump that brought water directly into the sink. "The well is close to the house," he explained. "I had the pump installed last year. Makes life much easier." He showed her the parlor, the dining room, his office, and then led her upstairs to the bedrooms. There were 4, all simply furnished but comfortable. He opened the door to one that overlooked the front of the property. "This would be your room. It has a good view and catches the morning sun. There is a lock on the door, and I have the only other key, which I will give to you. Your privacy is important." The room was larger than she had expected, with a real bed, a wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror, a comfortable chair by the window, and a small stove in the corner. It was by far the nicest room Ophelia had ever been offered. "This is generous," she said quietly. "It is a room," Atticus said. "You will be working hard, and you deserve a comfortable place to rest." He handed her a key. "Take some time to settle in. I will be in my office if you need anything. We can discuss the specifics of your duties over lunch." After he left, Ophelia stood in the middle of her new room and felt tears prick at her eyes again. This time, she let them fall. Not tears of despair, but of overwhelming relief. She had a job. She had shelter. She had been treated with dignity by a man who seemed genuinely kind, not cruel or mocking or false. It felt like a miracle, and Ophelia was not sure she believed in miracles anymore. But here she was, in a beautiful room in a solid house on a working ranch, with a position that offered security and respect. If it was a miracle, she would accept it gratefully. And if it was not, if there was some catch she had not yet discovered, at least she would face it from a position of relative strength rather than desperate poverty. She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the wardrobe and placing her mother's Bible on the bedside table. Then she washed her face, tidied her hair, and went downstairs to begin learning her new duties. Over the next several days, Ophelia settled into the rhythm of ranch life. Atticus proved to be an ideal employer, clear about his expectations, generous with his praise, and scrupulously respectful of her privacy. He rose early to work with the ranch hands, came in for breakfast at 7, worked until lunch at noon, and then continued until supper at 6. After supper, he usually retreated to his office to work on accounts and paperwork, or sat in the parlor reading. Ophelia found her work challenging but manageable. The house was large, but with only Atticus living in it, the cleaning was not overwhelming. Cooking for one man was far easier than cooking for a household, though Atticus had a hearty appetite and appreciated good food. She threw herself into the work, determined to prove her worth. She also discovered that Atticus had not exaggerated his skill as a baker. The pantry held professional quality supplies, and there were recipe books with detailed notes in Atticus's neat handwriting. On her 3rd day, Ophelia tried her hand at one of his bread recipes and produced loaves that were edible but not up to his standard. She was frustrated until Atticus came in, examined her technique, and offered gentle corrections. "The dough needs more kneading," he said, demonstrating with his large, capable hands. "See how it changes texture? You want it smooth and elastic like this, and the oven temperature is crucial. Too hot, and the crust burns before the inside cooks. Too cool, and you get a dense, heavy loaf." With his coaching, Ophelia's next attempt was much better, and by the end of the week, she was producing bread nearly as good as his. Atticus praised her sincerely, and Ophelia felt a warm glow of pride at the accomplishment. What surprised her most, though, was how comfortable she felt around Atticus. He never commented on her size or appearance except to make sure she was not working too hard or going without meals. He talked to her like an equal, asking her opinions on everything from how to organize the linen closet to whether he should buy more cattle in the spring. He listened when she spoke, remembered what she said, and acted on her suggestions when they made sense. It was so different from how she had been treated her entire life that Ophelia sometimes felt disoriented, as if she had stepped into someone else's reality. But Atticus's steady, genuine kindness slowly convinced her that this was real, that she had truly found a place where she was valued for her work and treated with respect. About 2 weeks after her arrival, Ophelia was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard raised voices outside. She looked out the window to see Atticus talking with another man, their body language tense. The other man was shorter than Atticus but stocky and aggressive in his stance. After a moment, Atticus said something final and the other man stalked away, clearly angry. When Atticus came in for supper, Ophelia asked carefully, "Is everything all right? I could not help but notice you had words with someone." Atticus's jaw was tight with frustration. "That was Silas Drummond. He owns the property to the east. He has been pressuring me to sell him part of my land, specifically the section with the creek. I keep refusing and he keeps pushing." "Why does he want it?" Water writes. "The creek that runs through my land feeds into his property, but if I control the source, I control how much water flows down to him. He is worried I will dam it or divert it." Atticus shook his head. "I've told him repeatedly that I have no intention of doing any such thing, but he does not trust me. He wants to own the land himself to be sure. Will he cause trouble? Possibly." Atticus sat down heavily. "Drummond is known for being difficult, but I am not selling. That land has been in my family. Well, it was the first piece I bought when I was 21. It matters to me." Ophelia served supper and they ate in companionable silence. She had learned that Atticus did not require constant conversation, that he was comfortable with quiet. It was one of many things she appreciated about him. But as they finished the meal, she said, "If there is anything I can do to help with this situation, please let me know." Atticus looked at her with surprise, then something warmer. "Thank you. I will keep that in mind." The trouble with Drummond came to a head 2 weeks later. Ophelia was in town with Atticus, helping him with supplies for the bakery, when they encountered Drummond on the street. The man was clearly drunk, weaving slightly as he approached them. "Vance," Drummond said loudly. "Still hiding behind that creek of yours, still too good to sell to your neighbors." "I am not hiding and I am not too good for anything," Atticus said calmly. "I simply am not selling. We have been over this, Silas. Go home and sleep it off." "Maybe I will just take what I need," Drummond said, his voice ugly. "Maybe I will just—" His eyes landed on Ophelia, and his expression twisted into something cruel. "Or maybe I understand now why you are being so stubborn. Too busy playing house with your fat little whore to care about being a good neighbor." The words hit Ophelia like a physical blow. She had been called names before, had endured mockery and cruelty, but hearing herself described so crudely in public made her stomach twist with humiliation. She started to turn away to remove herself from the situation, but Atticus moved faster. He stepped between Ophelia and Drummond, his body tense with controlled anger. "You will apologize," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now." "For what? Telling the truth?" Drummond sneered. "Everyone in town is talking about it. The great Atticus Vance, taking in some obese girl nobody else would touch. What does she do to earn her keep, Vance? Must be something special." Atticus's fist connected with Drummond's jaw before the man could finish the sentence. Drummond went down hard, landing in the muddy street. Atticus stood over him, breathing hard. "I said apologize. Miss Fletcher is my housekeeper, a respectable woman working a respectable job. You will treat her with respect or you will answer to me." Drummond wiped blood from his split lip and glared up at Atticus. "This is not over." "It is over," Atticus said flatly. "Come near me, my property, or Miss Fletcher again, and I will finish what I just started. Now get out of my sight." Drummond stumbled to his feet and lurched away. Atticus turned to Ophelia, his anger fading into concern. "Are you all right?" Ophelia nodded, not trusting her voice. She was shaking, though whether from shock, humiliation, or something else she could not say. Atticus had defended her. He had punched a man for insulting her. No one had ever done that before. No one had ever thought she was worth defending. "Come on," Atticus said gently. "Let us finish here and get home." They completed their errands in silence. Ophelia was aware of people staring, of whispers following them. Drummond's accusations had been loud enough for half the street to hear, and now everyone was looking at her with speculation and judgment. By the time they got back to the ranch, Ophelia felt raw and exposed. all the old shame and self-hatred rising up to choke her. She went straight to her room, intending to hide there until she could compose herself. But as she closed the door, she heard Atticus's footsteps on the stairs. He knocked gently. "Ophelia, may I speak with you?" She opened the door reluctantly. Atticus stood in the hallway, his hat in his hands, looking worried. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have handled that better. I should not have let my temper get the better of me." "You were defending me," Ophelia said quietly. "I was, but I made things worse by hitting him. Now people will talk even more, will speculate about why I reacted so strongly." Atticus ran a hand through his hair. "I have probably damaged your reputation." "I had no reputation to damage," Ophelia said bitterly. "I am exactly what Drummond called me, fat and unwanted, and stop." Atticus's voice was sharp. "Do not do that. Do not take his ugliness and make it your truth. It is the truth. You know it is. Everyone who looks at me sees it. I do not see it." Atticus stepped closer, his gray eyes intense on her face. "I see a woman who is intelligent, capable, and kind. I see someone who works hard, who takes pride in her work, who has made my house into a home again. I see someone who deserves respect and dignity, not cruelty and mockery." "You are the only one who sees that," Ophelia whispered. "Everyone else sees only my body, only my size. They judge me before I even speak. Then everyone else is a fool." Atticus's voice was fierce. "Their blindness is not your fault, Ophelia. You are worth 10 of Silas Drummond, worth 10 of all those people who judge you without knowing you." Ophelia felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She wanted to believe him, wanted to see herself through his eyes, but years of rejection and cruelty were hard to overcome. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you see me differently? Why do you care?" Atticus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I know what it is to be judged unfairly. Because I believe in treating people with dignity, and because—" He paused, then continued carefully. "Because in the past month I have come to value you not just as my housekeeper, but as a person I care about. I look forward to our conversations at meals. I appreciate your insights and your humor. I like having you here, Ophelia, not because of what you do for me, but because of who you are." The words hung in the air between them, significant and charged. Ophelia stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You care about me." "I do," Atticus said simply. "More than I probably should, given that you work for me, but I cannot seem to help it." Ophelia's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I care about you too," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I did not mean to. I tried not to. But you have been so kind, so respectful, so different from anyone I have ever known. I look forward to seeing you every day. I find myself thinking about you when I should be working. I—" She trailed off, uncertain how to finish. Atticus stepped closer still until they were only a foot apart. "I want to court you properly," he said. "If you would allow it. Not as your employer, but as a man who admires you and wants to know you better. As a man who hopes, perhaps, that you might come to care for him as more than just a kind employer." "I already do," Ophelia whispered. "I already care for you as more than an employer. But Atticus, are you certain? I am not. I am not the kind of woman men want. I am not pretty or delicate. I am large and plain, and you are beautiful," Atticus interrupted. "Your eyes are the color of rich earth, warm and deep. Your hair shines like mahogany in the sunlight. Your smile, on the rare occasions when you truly smile, lights up your entire face. And yes, your body is not what society deems fashionable. But it is your body, and I find nothing about it shameful or ugly. You are beautiful to me, Ophelia Fletcher. All of you." No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her the way Atticus was looking at her now, with warmth and admiration and something deeper, something that made her breath catch. "I do not know what to say," she managed. "Say yes." Atticus said. Say you will let me court you properly. Say you will give me a chance to show you how much I value you. Yes, Ophelia said, the word coming out on a breath. Yes, I will. Atticus smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. Thank you, he said. I promise I will do this right. With respect and patience. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other better. Over the following weeks, Atticus proved true to his word. He courted Ophelia with a gentleness and thoughtfulness that left her breathless. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow. He read to her in the evenings from books of poetry and adventure. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, her thoughts on everything from politics to philosophy. He listened to her answers with genuine interest, treating her opinions as valuable. On Sundays, when he went to town to work at the bakery, he began inviting Ophelia to come with him. They would work side by side, Atticus teaching her more advanced baking techniques while they talked and laughed. Ophelia discovered that she loved baking, loved the precision and creativity it required. She experimented with recipes, adding spices and flavors, and Atticus praised her innovations. The people of Pioche watched their courtship with curiosity and varying degrees of judgment. Some whispered that Atticus was settling, that he could do better than a fat housekeeper. Others, particularly some of the women who had known him longer, were more supportive. Mrs. Chen, the former housekeeper who had returned to town for a visit, stopped by the bakery one Sunday and took Ophelia aside. "Mr. Vance is a good man," she said in her accented English. "Best man I ever worked for. He treats people right, no matter who they are. You are lucky to have his regard, but he is lucky too. I can see the way he looks at you. That man is in love." Ophelia blushed furiously. "We are only courting. Courting now, but not for long, I think." Mrs. Chen smiled. "He is not a man who does things halfway. When he decides something, he commits fully. He has decided on you, Miss Fletcher. The question is, have you decided on him?" Ophelia thought about that conversation as she prepared supper that evening. Had she decided on Atticus? The truth was, she had decided weeks ago. She had fallen in love with him slowly, carefully, hardly daring to believe it was real. But it was real. Every day, Atticus showed her in 100 small ways that he valued her, cared for her, loved her. He never made her feel like she was too much or not enough. He treated her like she was precious. That night after supper, as they sat together in the parlor, Atticus reading and Ophelia mending, she said quietly, "Mrs. Chen came to see me today." Atticus looked up from his book. "Did she? How is she?" "She is well. Her mother is recovering." Ophelia set down her mending. "She said something that made me think." "What was that?" "She said you are a man who commits fully when you decide on something." Ophelia met his eyes. "Have you decided on me, Atticus, truly?" Atticus set his book aside and crossed the room to kneel beside her chair. He took her hand in his touch warm and steady. "I have decided on you," he said seriously. "I love you, Ophelia. I have loved you since the day you stood in the snow and tried to bite that frozen bread rather than give up, because you are too strong to quit even when everything is against you. I love your intelligence, your kindness, your dry sense of humor. I love the way you hum when you bake, and the way you organize everything so efficiently. I love that you challenge me to be better, to think more deeply, to see the world through different eyes. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you if you will have me." Ophelia felt tears spilling down her cheeks again. "I love you too," she said, her voice shaking. "I never thought anyone would see me the way you do. I never thought anyone would want me. But you do, and I love you for it. I love you for your kindness and your integrity. I love you for the way you treat everyone with respect. I love you for defending me, for believing in me, for making me believe in myself. I love you, Atticus Vance." Atticus rose and pulled her gently to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "May I kiss you?" "Please," Ophelia whispered. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, his lips warm against hers. It was Ophelia's first kiss, and it was everything she had never let herself dream of. When they finally pulled apart, Atticus rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Be my wife, my partner, my love. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you how cherished you are." "Yes," Ophelia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch with a few close friends in attendance. Ophelia wore a new dress that Atticus had insisted on buying her, made of soft blue fabric that brought out the warmth in her eyes. She felt beautiful, not because the dress transformed her body, but because Atticus looked at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. The pastor who married them was not the young man who had given out frozen bread, but an older minister from a neighboring town who Atticus respected. He spoke about marriage as a partnership of equals, about mutual respect and love. Ophelia found herself believing every word. Their wedding night was gentle and patient, Atticus taking his time to show Ophelia that her body was not something to be ashamed of, but celebrated. He touched her with reverence, kissed her with passion, and made love to her like she was precious beyond measure. For the first time in her life, Ophelia felt beautiful in her own skin. The months that followed were the happiest of Ophelia's life. She and Atticus fell into an easy partnership, managing the ranch and the bakery together. Ophelia's talent for baking grew, and she began creating her own recipes, which became popular at the bakery. Atticus supported her completely, proud of her accomplishments. The issue with Silas Drummond resolved itself when Drummond lost his ranch in a card game and left Nevada for California. The new owner of the neighboring property was a pleasant widow named Margaret Simmons, who had no interest in disputes over water rights and proved to be a good neighbor. As autumn turned to winter, Ophelia discovered she was pregnant. She told Atticus over breakfast one morning, watching his face transform with joy. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Ophelia asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "I am overjoyed." Atticus came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "A child with you, Ophelia. There is nothing I could want more." The pregnancy was not easy. Ophelia's body, already large, swelled further, and she struggled with exhaustion and discomfort. But Atticus was endlessly patient and supportive, taking over more of the household work and insisting she rest whenever she needed. He read to her in the evenings, rubbed her swollen feet, and told her every day how beautiful she was. Their son was born in late spring of 1882, after a long and difficult labor. Atticus held Ophelia's hand through all of it, refusing to leave her side even when the midwife suggested he might be more comfortable elsewhere. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and screaming, Atticus cut the cord with shaking hands and placed their son on Ophelia's chest. "He is perfect," Atticus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Ophelia. Thank you for this gift." They named him Andrew after Atticus's father, and he was a healthy, robust baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. Ophelia loved him with a fierceness that surprised her, and watching Atticus with their son made her fall even more deeply in love with her husband. He was a devoted father, patient and playful, singing lullabies in his rough voice and pacing the floor with Andrew at all hours of the night. As Andrew grew from baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Atticus hired more hands and expanded the cattle operation. The bakery continued to thrive, with Ophelia's recipes becoming local favorites. They built an addition onto the house, adding more rooms for the children they hoped to have. Those children came in time. A daughter named Olivia 2 years after Andrew, and then another son, Alexander, 2 years after that. Each birth was hard, each recovery long, but each baby was deeply wanted and cherished. Ophelia's body bore the marks of childbearing, but she no longer viewed it with shame. This body had given life, had nourished her children, had been loved thoroughly by a good man. It was strong and capable, and Ophelia had learned to value it for what it could do rather than how it looked. The children grew up surrounded by love and respect. Atticus and Ophelia taught them to judge people by their character rather than their appearance, to treat everyone with dignity, to work hard and be kind. Andrew inherited his father's love of ranching, often following Atticus around the property from the time he could walk. Olivia showed her mother's talent for baking and her father's head for business. Alexander was gentle and bookish, preferring reading to outdoor work, and his parents supported him fully, encouraging his education. Years passed in a rhythm of work and love, seasons and celebrations. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. The bakery remained popular, a gathering place where people came for fresh bread and friendly conversation. Atticus and Ophelia became pillars of the community, respected for their integrity and generosity. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Atticus closed the bakery for the day and took Ophelia back to the place where they had first met, the church where frozen bread had once been handed out as charity. The young pastor was long gone, replaced by the older minister who had married them. The church now had a proper soup kitchen, serving hot meals with dignity, largely funded by anonymous donations from Atticus and Ophelia. "You remember that night?" Atticus asked, holding her hand as they stood outside the church. "When I found you trying to eat frozen bread." "I remember everything," Ophelia said. "I remember thinking I had reached the end, that I had nowhere left to go, and then you appeared and offered me dignity instead of pity." "You gave me something too," Atticus said. "A reason to care about more than just work and success. A partnership, a family, a life filled with love. You made me better, Ophelia. You make me better every day." Ophelia leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, the warmth of his love. "We made each other better," she said. "That is what love does." They stood together for a while, watching the sun set over the mountains, remembering the cold winter night that had brought them together. So much had changed since then. Ophelia was no longer the desperate, rejected girl who had stumbled into Pioche with nothing but shame and empty pockets. She was a wife, a mother, a successful businesswoman, a valued member of the community. She was loved deeply and completely by a man who saw her true worth. And Atticus was no longer the lonely bachelor focused only on building his businesses. He was a husband and father, surrounded by the family he had always wanted, sharing his life with a woman who challenged and inspired him. They had built something beautiful together, something that started with a simple act of kindness and grew into a love that would last a lifetime. They had created a home filled with laughter and warmth, raised children who would carry their values into the world, built businesses that served their community with integrity. As they walked back to their wagon, hand in hand, Ophelia thought about that frozen bread, about how close she had come to giving up. She thought about how Atticus had seen her when she was invisible to everyone else, how he had offered her dignity when everyone else offered only judgment. "What are you thinking about?" Atticus asked, helping her up into the wagon seat. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Ophelia said. "For you, for our family, for this life we have built, for the day you told me to eat with dignity instead of settling for frozen charity." Atticus climbed up beside her and took her hand again. "I am the grateful one," he said. "You have given me everything I could ever want." They drove home through the twilight, back to the ranch where their children waited, back to the life they had created together. The mountains stood dark against the darkening sky, and the first stars were beginning to appear. It was a beautiful evening, peaceful and perfect, exactly the kind of evening Ophelia had never let herself dream of having. But she had it now. She had love, security, respect, and dignity. She had a husband who adored her, children who filled her days with joy, work that gave her purpose. She had everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever thought possible. And it had all started with a cowboy who believed that everyone, even a desperate girl with no prospects, deserved to eat with dignity. The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm that Ophelia never took for granted. As their children grew older and more independent, she and Atticus found new ways to work together and support their community. They expanded the bakery to include a small cafe where people could sit and share meals, always ensuring that those who could not pay were served discreetly and with respect. No one who came to their establishment hungry was ever turned away, and no one was ever made to feel lesser for accepting help. Andrew, at 18, took on more responsibility at the ranch, proving himself to be as capable and hardworking as his father. He had grown into a tall, strong young man with his father's quiet integrity and his mother's warm heart. Olivia, at 16, was already managing much of the bakery's operations, introducing new products and keeping meticulous accounts. At 14, Alexander had earned a scholarship to attend a school in San Francisco, and though Ophelia missed him terribly, she was fiercely proud of his academic achievements. One evening in the autumn of 1892, as Ophelia and Atticus sat together on their porch watching the sun set, Atticus said, "We should take a trip." Ophelia looked at him in surprise. "A trip? Where?" "Anywhere you want to go. The children are old enough to manage without us for a few weeks. Andrew can handle the ranch, and Olivia has the bakery well in hand. We could visit Alexander in San Francisco, see the city, maybe travel up the coast." "That sounds wonderful," Ophelia said, warming to the idea. They had worked so hard for so many years, building their businesses and raising their children. The thought of traveling together, just the two of them, was appealing. "Then we will do it." Atticus took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I want to show you the ocean. I want to walk with you on a beach and watch you discover new places. We have built something solid here, something that can stand without us for a while. Let us have an adventure together." They took their trip that winter, leaving Nevada's cold for California's milder coast. Ophelia had never seen the ocean, and when she stood on the beach for the first time, feeling the wind in her hair and watching the waves roll endlessly toward shore, she felt something expand in her chest. The world was so much bigger than she had ever imagined, and she was part of it, truly part of it, no longer watching from the sidelines but living fully. Atticus stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, and said, "Beautiful, is it not?" "It is magnificent," Ophelia breathed. "I never imagined anything like this." "Neither did I," Atticus said, "until I met you. You taught me to see beauty in unexpected places, Ophelia. You taught me that the most precious things are often overlooked by those who do not know how to really see." They spent 2 weeks in California, visiting Alexander at his school and touring San Francisco's steep streets and bustling markets. Everywhere they went, Atticus treated Ophelia with the same respect and affection he had shown from the beginning. He never seemed embarrassed by her size or appearance, never tried to hide her or minimize her presence. He was proud to introduce her as his wife, and his love for her was evident in every glance, every touch, every word. When they returned to Nevada, it was with renewed energy and appreciation for the life they had built. The ranch and bakery had run smoothly in their absence, proof that they had raised capable children and built solid businesses. But it was good to be home, good to fall back into familiar rhythms. As the 1890s progressed, the West continued to change. Pioche was no longer the rough mining town it had been when Ophelia first arrived. It had grown and civilized with better roads, more businesses, and even electric lights in some buildings. The wild, dangerous days were fading into history, replaced by a more settled, prosperous era. Ophelia watched these changes with mixed feelings. She was glad for the improvements, for the increased safety and comfort. But she also remembered what the old Pioche had given her. A chance to start over, a place where her past did not matter, a town where she had found love and built a life. In 1895, Olivia married a young man named Thomas Wright, who worked as a banker in town. The wedding was a joyous occasion, held at the ranch with half the county in attendance. Ophelia watched her daughter exchange vows and remembered her own wedding day, remembered how terrified and hopeful she had been. Olivia was confident and radiant, secure in her love and her place in the world. Ophelia was grateful that her daughter had never known the shame and rejection she herself had experienced, that Olivia had grown up loved and valued. Andrew married the following year to Sarah Miller, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. They built a house on Vance land and started their own herd. Alexander, after finishing his schooling, surprised everyone by returning to Nevada and opening a bookshop in Pioche, filling a need for books and learning materials in the growing town. As Ophelia watched her children build their own lives and families, she felt a deep satisfaction. She and Atticus had created something lasting, not just in their businesses but in their family. They had raised children who were kind, capable, and confident, who treated others with respect and dignity, who understood the value of hard work and integrity. One spring morning, in 1898, Ophelia woke to find Atticus already up, standing at the bedroom window looking out over the ranch. She joined him, slipping her arm around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I am thinking about how blessed I am," Atticus said. "I am thinking about that winter night 17 years ago when I saw you outside the church, trying to eat frozen bread. I am thinking about how that one moment changed my entire life." "It changed mine too," Ophelia said. "You saved me, Atticus, not just from hunger or cold, but from believing I was worthless. You showed me I deserved dignity and respect. You gave me a life I never thought I could have." "We saved each other," Atticus said, echoing the words she had spoken years before. "I was so focused on work and success that I had forgotten how to really live. You reminded me. You taught me that love and family and connection matter more than any business success." They stood together watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and pink, content in the life they had built and the love they shared. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful. In the distance, they could see Andrew working with the cattle, starting his day as Atticus had started so many of his own. Closer to the house, the garden Ophelia had planted over the years bloomed with early spring flowers. "You ever regret it?" Ophelia asked quietly. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had not stopped to help me that night?" "Never," Atticus said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Ophelia. Loving you, building this life with you, raising our children together, these are the things I am most proud of. Not the ranch, not the bakery, not any business success. You and our family, that is my legacy." Tears pricked Ophelia's eyes, happy tears this time. After all these years, Atticus could still make her feel cherished with just a few words. "I love you," she said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I will love you just as long," Atticus replied, pulling her closer. As the years passed into the new century, Ophelia and Atticus gradually stepped back from the daily operations of their businesses, letting their children take over more responsibilities. They spent their time traveling occasionally, visiting their growing number of grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. In 1903, on a warm June evening, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. Atticus was now 50 years old, his dark hair liberally streaded with silver. Ophelia was 42, her own hair showing threads of gray. They had lived through changes and challenges, raised 3 successful children, built businesses that served their community, and loved each other deeply through it all. "You remember," Ophelia said, leaning against Atticus's shoulder, "when you first brought me here to the ranch. I could not believe this was real. I kept waiting for it to turn out to be a trick or a dream." "I remember thinking you looked terrified," Atticus said, "like you expected me to turn cruel at any moment." "I had learned to expect the worst from people," Ophelia admitted. "But you were different from the beginning. You looked at me and saw a person, not just a body to be judged." "How could I see anything else?" Atticus asked. "You were smart and capable and strong. Those were the things that mattered. The rest was just what narrow-minded people focused on because they could not see past the surface." "You changed my life," Ophelia said simply. "You gave me back my dignity, my sense of worth. You gave me love and family and purpose. Everything good in my life came from that night you offered me fresh bread and told me to eat with dignity." "Everything good in my life came from you accepting that offer," Atticus replied. "From you trusting me enough to take a chance. From you loving me back. We built this together, Ophelia. Every good thing we have, we created as partners." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the evening shadows lengthen across the land they had worked and loved for more than 2 decades. In the distance, they could see lights in Andrew's house, where their grandchildren were probably getting ready for bed. Closer by, the main house glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming. "I have been thinking," Atticus said eventually, "about what we should do with the businesses when we are gone. I want to make sure everything is clearly laid out, that the children and grandchildren are taken care of, that the legacy we have built continues." "What are you thinking?" Ophelia asked. "I think we should divide things equally among the children. Andrew gets the ranch, Olivia gets the bakery, and Alexander gets the equivalent value in cash or property. That way each of them has something substantial, and no one has to compete or argue." "That sounds fair," Ophelia agreed. "But I also think we should set aside something for charity, a fund to help people who are in the situation I was in, people who need a hand up rather than a hand out." "That is an excellent idea." Atticus squeezed her hand. "We could establish a trust specifically for that purpose. Money to help people find work, get training, start over. Given with dignity and respect, the way help should always be given." They spent the next several weeks working with a lawyer to formalize their plans. The children were called in and informed of the arrangements, and all 3 expressed gratitude and support. More importantly, they embraced the idea of the charitable trust, each contributing ideas for how it could best serve the community. The Fletcher Vance Trust was established in 1904, funded generously and designed to provide assistance to those facing poverty, discrimination, or hardship. The trust provided job training, business loans, emergency assistance, and support for education. It was administered by a board that included members of the Vance family as well as community leaders, and it operated on principles of dignity and respect. The first person to receive assistance from the trust was a young widow with 3 children, whose husband had died in a mining accident. The trust provided her with training in bookkeeping and helped her secure a position with a local business. Within a year, she was supporting her family independently and had regained her confidence and hope. Stories like hers multiplied over the years as the trust helped dozens, then hundreds of people. Ophelia took particular satisfaction in seeing others receive the kind of help she had once needed, given in a way that preserved their dignity and empowered them to build better lives. In 1910, Ophelia and Atticus celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party at the ranch, and it seemed like everyone they had ever known came to celebrate. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and music. Andrew's children performed a little play they had written about their grandparents' love story, full of dramatic moments and happy endings. As Ophelia watched her grandchildren act out a simplified version of how she and Atticus had met, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That terrified, rejected girl who had arrived in Pioche with nothing but shame and desperation would never have believed that this life was possible. She would never have imagined being surrounded by loving family, respected in her community, secure in the knowledge that she was valued and cherished. But it had all happened, every bit of it, because one man had looked past society's prejudices and seen her true worth. Because Atticus Vance had offered her fresh bread and told her to eat with dignity, treating her like a human being deserving of respect. That simple act of kindness had changed the trajectory of her entire life. When the party wound down and the guests had gone home, Ophelia and Atticus returned to their house, tired but happy. They sat together in the parlor, in the same chairs they had occupied that night Atticus had first told her he loved her. "It has been quite a life," Atticus said, taking her hand. "It has been a wonderful life," Ophelia corrected. "Full of love and purpose and joy. I could not have asked for more." "Neither could I." Atticus raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, Ophelia. Still the best decision I ever made." "I love you," Ophelia said, the words as true now as they had been when she first spoke them. "With everything I am, I love you." "And I love you," Atticus replied, "always and forever." They sat together as night deepened around them, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. They had started with nothing but kindness and grown it into a legacy of love, family, and service that would outlast them both. Outside, the Nevada wind whispered through the pines. The mountains stood eternal and unchanging, witnesses to the passage of time and the endurance of love. And in the house that Atticus and Ophelia had made into a home, warmth and light glowed steady, a beacon of all they had built together. The years continued their steady march, bringing both joy and sorrow as all years do. In 1915, Atticus suffered a stroke that left him weakened but still mentally sharp. Ophelia nursed him back to health as best she could, and though he never regained his full strength, he recovered enough to continue enjoying life. They spent more time together, taking gentle walks around the property, sitting on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with noise and laughter. Andrew's eldest son, another Atticus, showed signs of becoming a fine rancher himself. Olivia's daughter had inherited her grandmother's talent for baking and was already creating new recipes at the bakery. Alexander's children were all bookish and thoughtful, carrying on their father's love of learning. In 1918, as the Great War raged in Europe, Ophelia fell ill with influenza. It was during the terrible pandemic that swept the world, killing millions. For weeks, she battled the illness, with Atticus refusing to leave her side despite the risk to himself. The children wanted to care for their mother, but Atticus would not be moved. "I have loved her for more than 30 years," he told Andrew when his son tried to insist he rest. "I will not leave her now. Whatever happens, we will face it together." Ophelia recovered slowly, her strong constitution pulling her through when so many others perished. When she was finally well enough to sit up and take solid food, the first thing she saw was Atticus asleep in the chair beside her bed, exhausted from weeks of constant care. She reached out and touched his hand, and he woke immediately. "You are better," he said, relief flooding his face. "Thank God you are better." "You stayed with me," Ophelia said, her voice still weak. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I be?" Atticus moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking her hand carefully. "You are my life, Ophelia. You are my heart. I could not leave you." "I love you," she whispered. "I have loved you from the moment you told me to eat with dignity. And I have loved you from the moment I saw you trying to be brave when everything was against you," Atticus replied. "That kind of strength and courage, that is what first drew me to you. And every day since, I have discovered more reasons to love you." Ophelia recovered fully over the following months, and she and Atticus continued their life together, grateful for each day they had. They were both older now, moving more slowly, tiring more easily. But their love had not diminished with age. If anything, it had deepened, become richer and more precious with the passage of time. In 1920, they celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them, with a simple dinner at home. They looked through old photographs, remembering the years they had shared, the challenges they had overcome, the joys they had experienced. "You ever wish things had been different?" Ophelia asked. "That you had married someone younger, prettier, more socially acceptable?" "Never," Atticus said immediately. "You are all I ever wanted or needed. You made my life complete, Ophelia. You gave me love, family, purpose, and joy. I would not change a single thing about our life together. Not even the hard parts, the struggles and sorrows, not even those." Atticus took her hand. "The hard parts made us stronger. They taught us what really matters, and we faced them together, which made all the difference." They sat together looking at photographs of their children and grandchildren, at images of the ranch through the years, at pictures of themselves getting gradually older. In the early photographs, they were young and uncertain, still learning how to be together. In the later ones, they were clearly comfortable and confident, a team that had weathered every storm. "We did well," Ophelia said softly. "Did we not?" "We did magnificently," Atticus agreed. "We built a life of meaning and love. We raised good children who are raising good children of their own. We created businesses that serve our community with integrity. We helped others find the dignity and opportunity we found together. We have nothing to regret and everything to be proud of." In 1923, on a beautiful spring morning very much like the morning he had first brought Ophelia to the ranch, Atticus passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 70 years old and had lived a full, rich life. Ophelia woke to find him gone, and though she had known this day would come eventually, the grief was overwhelming. But even in her sorrow, she found comfort in the memories of their life together. Atticus had loved her completely, had treated her with unwavering respect and affection, had shown her every day that she was valued and cherished. He had given her dignity when the world offered only shame. He had seen her true worth when others saw only her appearance. He had loved her for exactly who she was. The funeral was well attended, with people coming from all over Nevada to pay their respects. Andrew, Olivia, and Alexander spoke about their father, sharing stories of his kindness, his integrity, his love for his family. The minister spoke about Atticus's contributions to the community, his generosity, his faith in the inherent dignity of every person. When it was Ophelia's turn to speak, she stood before the gathered crowd and said simply, "My husband taught me that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. He lived that belief every day of his life. He showed me that love is not about appearances or social standing, but about truly seeing and valuing another person. He saved my life in every way that matters, and I will be grateful to him for that, until my last breath. He was the best man I ever knew, and I will love him forever." After Atticus's death, Ophelia continued to live at the ranch, cared for by her children and surrounded by her grandchildren. She remained involved in the Fletcher Vance Trust, making sure it continued to operate according to the principles she and Atticus had established. She also spent time writing down her story, wanting future generations to know how their family had started, how love and dignity had triumphed over prejudice and hardship. She lived another 7 years, dying peacefully in 1930 at the age of 69. In those final years, she often thought about that frozen winter night in 1881, when she had arrived in Pioche with nothing but desperation and shame. She thought about the young pastor handing out frozen bread and calling it charity. She thought about Atticus appearing like an angel in the snow, offering her warmth, food, and dignity. That night had changed everything. That simple act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that led to a life of love, purpose, and meaning. It had taught her that her worth was not determined by her appearance or by society's judgment, but by her character, her capabilities, and the love she shared with others. Ophelia was buried beside Atticus on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone reads simply, "Ophelia Fletcher Vance, 1861–1930. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she lived with dignity and taught others to do the same." Years later, their great-grandchildren would visit the graves and ask about the people buried there. They would hear the story of how Ophelia and Atticus met, about frozen bread and fresh baking, about dignity and respect and love that overcame all obstacles. They would hear about a cowboy who saw worth where others saw only shame, and about a woman who learned to value herself because someone else valued her first. And the lesson would continue to pass down through generations, that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, that love sees beyond surface appearances, that kindness can change lives, and that the most important thing we can do is respect the inherent worth of every human being. The ranch and bakery continued to operate successfully, managed by Andrew and Olivia's descendants. The Fletcher Vance Trust grew and expanded, helping thousands of people over the decades, always operating on the principle that charity should empower rather than humiliate, should offer hand up rather than a hand out. And in Pioche, Nevada, the story of Ophelia and Atticus became legend, told and retold as an example of what love should be. Parents told it to their children, teachers shared it with their students, and ministers used it in sermons about the importance of seeing beyond surface appearances to the true value of each person. The frozen bread became a symbol of charity given without thought or care, while the fresh, warm bread Atticus offered represented dignity and respect. And the phrase "eat with dignity" became shorthand in the community for treating others with the respect they deserved. It was a story that reminded people that love could be found in unexpected places, that appearances did not determine worth, that kindness could change lives. It was a story about two people who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. And it was a true story, one that had really happened, that had really changed lives and created a legacy that lasted far beyond the lifetimes of the two people at its center. Ophelia Fletcher had arrived in Pioche as a desperate, rejected girl with nothing but frozen bread as charity. She had left it, decades later, as a respected matriarch of a loving family, a successful businesswoman and a philanthropist who had helped countless others find the dignity and opportunity she had once been denied. And it had all started because a cowboy named Atticus Vance had looked at her and seen not her size or appearance, but her inherent worth. Because he had offered her fresh bread and told her to eat with dignity. Because he had treated her like a human being deserving of respect. That simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love story that spanned decades, created a family that thrived for generations, and established a legacy of dignity and respect that continued long after both of them were gone. It was proof that kindness matters, that love can overcome prejudice, that treating others with dignity can change the world one person at a time. And it was a reminder that the most important things in life are not wealth or appearance or social standing, but love, respect, and the recognition of the inherent worth of every human being. Ophelia and Atticus's story became part of the fabric of Pioche, woven into the history of the town and the values of its people. And though the world continued to change, though the Old West faded into memory and new eras dawned, the lesson of their love remained constant and true. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves respect. And love, real love, sees past the surface to the true worth of the person beneath. That was what Ophelia and Atticus had taught through their lives and their love. And that was the legacy they left behind. A gift more valuable than any fortune, a lesson more important than any worldly success. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death and the passage of years. But the love they shared, the lives they touched, the changes they made, those things endured. And in that endurance they achieved a kind of immortality, living on in the hearts and minds of those who heard their story and took its lessons to heart. The obese girl who had been given frozen bread as charity became a beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and pillar of her community. The cowboy who baked fresh and said, "Eat with dignity," became the man who changed her life and loved her completely. Together, they wrote a love story that transcended their time and place, that spoke to universal truths about human worth, dignity, and the transformative power of love. And they lived happily, truly happily, building a life of meaning and purpose, raising a family, serving their community, and loving each other deeply until death parted them. It was not a fairy tale, but something better. A true story of real love, real challenges overcome, and real joy found in partnership and commitment. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the businesses they built, in the charitable trust that continued their work, and in the story itself, told and retold, reminding people that dignity matters, that love sees truly, and that kindness can change everything.